Are you brainwashed? I have a very simple test that will let you know. Do you think it is ever good to torture anyone to death for any reason whatsoever? Do you think creating a place of eternal torture is good? Do you think threatening others with eternal torture is good? Do you think the Christian God is good? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you are brainwashed.
Morality isn't invented by humans or dictated by brain chemistry. If it were, anything could be considered right as long as someone believed it or was satisfied with it. So that's not how morality works. I think we're kind of losing the plot here. Like, you do understand that most people that go around and do these things don't think those things are good, they just don't care. They don't care if they're causing harm. They understand that what they're going to do isn't moral, they just don't care. Yes, there are some people that genuinely just cannot get a grasp of what's right and what's wrong. A lot of Christians, apparently, since they're constantly confessing that they wouldn't know right from wrong if they didn't have their book, which is concerning. Although even then, I think that deep down they understand right from wrong, they just don't really want to admit it because then they would have to be admitting that they don't think the Bible is actually a source of morality. But the amount of Christians that will tell an atheist, if you don't believe in God, then you could just go around doing whatever you want with no consequences. As if that's how it works? It's a social construct. We look at society and we understand that some things harm and some things don't. Some things are detrimental and some things are beneficial. And based on being a part of that society, we use things like empathy. And we understand that we don't like harm being done to us, so we're not going to harm others. I promise this isn't rocket science. It's very basic.
Yo, what's up, dude? Playing some VR? Fuck you. I'm just playing God Simulator, dude. What does that do? Oh, I'm just resetting all of Earth's life because humans became wicked. Fucking die. What is that? What? Oh, that? Oh, that's just all the puppies, kittens, and babies on Earth drowning. Fucking die. So you have to drown everyone to reset the game? Well, no, you don't have to because you're all powerful. So you can choose to snap them out of existence painlessly, or you can make them all suffer and drown in vengeful rainwater. You get way more XP if you make them drown, so. Fucking die. Damn. And get this, I'm making a 900-year-old drunk guy and his family be the only survivors. And they have to repopulate the Earth through incest. But isn't the point of the game to get the humans to worship you? Like, what if no one trusts you anymore after you drowned everybody? Yeah, but all I have to do is a love bomb where I give them a rainbow and promise I'll never do it again, and then they'll go back to worshiping me. Oh, okay. Yeah, and I changed the settings to coercion mode so that whenever the humans that don't worship me die, they stay conscious and are tortured with fire and they suffer for eternity. Damn! Aren't you supposed to be the good guy, though? Yeah, and there's a bad guy, too. He tries to deceive the humans by teaching them logic and critical thinking. Yeah, as soon as humans start to use rationality, all hell breaks loose, and I have to just drown the planet again. You know, if humans would just stop leaning on their own understanding, they may truly come to know the fullness of my love and power. Well, shit, even I know that. I mean, Proverbs 3:5 clearly says that whenever the Bible says silly things, don't trust your own brain. Trust the Bible because what God says is more smarter.
Why is hell, or the idea of eternal torment and torture, so appealing to Christians who are told that the greatest commandment of all is to love? Obviously, there's no official answer for this, but I'm going to give you my opinion and hope that it resonates with some people that may be deconstructing, or hope that it provides an opportunity to counter-argue if you are a Christian and do believe in the faith. I would love to know your thoughts either way. Now, of course, I'm just a person with an opinion, but I don't think that it's very loving to wish hell upon people that don't believe the same as you, or at the very least, kind of shrug your shoulders at their impending doom at the end of the day. I do think that the modern concept of hell does appeal to our innate human desire for justice. I think this is why Thomas Aquinas' very controversial perspective of hell kind of appealed to those earlier Christians, because it was God's ultimate form of justice, where believers could take refuge in the fact that God had won the war overall. Maybe not the battle, but the war. I think this is especially appealing to Christians whenever they are being persecuted or just kind of overall experiencing some form of suffering here on earth, because it goes along with the concept that even if life won't be fair to us, we can maybe at least imagine this afterlife where the evildoers and the unfaithful kind of pay for their crimes, while their victims, aka the Christians, kind of receive this eternal relief from the torment. On the other hand, my foreseeable unpopular opinion is that the modern concept of hell kind of acts as a vehicle that carries Christians' lack of tolerance for other beliefs or faiths, or their discomfort even with the way that other people may choose to live their life, because it invokes their ethical divinity, if you will. On a human level, I think all this does is kind of put on display our innate human desire to be superior over others, or at the very least, our desire for justice for those that seemingly live immorally or unjustly in their own lives. Again, this is all speculation. This is just my opinion. This is just my perspective. If I missed something, let me know. If you disagree, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay, Christers. Consent is the entire premises of free will. Understand? Hail Satan.
Do you really think that all of humanity before Jesus had no morals? Like, tell me you've never studied history without telling me. Humans have been around for so long, and you think that one religion is the only thing morals come from? I would definitely say that Christianity has shaped American society, but that doesn't mean that it's like the moral code that everyone needs to abide by. Especially because, like, in the Old Testament, there is no moral code. And Jesus's moral code was basically love others. What a concept. That one I could get behind. Personally, I think the best code to live by would be something along the lines of do no harm, like to yourself and to others. But you don't need a book written 2,000 years ago to help you do that. It's just so short-sighted to say that Christianity should be the standard.
So what about the law that prohibits eating shellfish?
Yeah, we don't really follow that one anymore.
What about wearing mixed fabrics?
That's the Old Testament.
Keeping the Sabbath holy?
Nah.
What about stoning unruly children?
Nope.
How do you feel about the verse that says men should not lie with men as one lies with a woman?
Oh, now that one we like.
Are God's actions in the Bible morally repugnant? Is God morally repugnant? I've heard some Christian apologists argue that we can't judge God's morality by human standards, that because God is our creator, his ways are beyond our understanding, or that divine reasoning operates on a level we simply can't grasp. But if that's true, that creates a serious problem. Without any reference to our own moral framework, we have no standard by which to evaluate God's actions. We can't rationally call God good or just if those terms no longer carry the same meaning they do in human moral reasoning. In other words, if God's morality operates by a wholly different logic, then moral praise of God becomes meaningless. We lose any basis for saying that God is morally good in any way that we can comprehend.
You can tell me your doctrine, but I'm going to believe your behavior. When someone demonizes and mistreats the immigrant, the poor, the starving, the marginalized, I'm not really interested in hearing about their religious beliefs, because they've already shown what they are. I don't need to sit in judgment over everyone. That's not my role. But I do think we have to be honest. Words lose their meaning when actions contradict them. You can recite scripture, defend doctrine, and call yourself spiritual, but if it doesn't translate into compassion, dignity, humanity, what is it actually worth? If a belief system excuses cruelty, protects power, and ignores suffering, then maybe the problem isn't people losing faith. Maybe the problem is people finally recognizing empty faith when they see it. Again, it's not about perfection. None of us are perfect. But at the very least, belief, any belief, should make us more human, not less.
Okay, so there's like a lot to unpack here. First of all, you implying that me, one person that can be in one location at a time, be doing one thing at a time, could stop plenty of grapes and kills, so why blame God? Why blame God? I'll tell you why I blame God. Let me ask you this. If you had all the knowledge in the world and all the power in the world, if you're telling me that you would prevent cancer, you would stop grape from happening, you would prevent murder from happening, congratulations, you're better than this guy's God. Instead of holding your God accountable and using your critical thinking skills, you decide to blame a mortal being such as myself. It is the equivalent. Stop it. This is like asking an ant to pick up your water bottle and toss it to you, instead of just asking your friend to do that for you. For me to even conjure up the knowledge of knowing when a killing is happening and knowing when a grape is happening, it just would take too much time, right? So again, with the analogy I was saying, why wouldn't you just expect your friend to toss you your water bottle? Why would you expect an ant to do such thing when it would take virtually forever? Let me know if that analogy needs any tweaking or anything. I kind of made it up on the spot, but you get my point. And truthfully too, like even like as a woman, it is significantly harder for me to prevent these things versus a man. So again, by you saying you too have the power, it's like where I do not have holy knowledge, the spidey sense when a grape is happening. And even if, what do you mean I'm gonna prevent it? What do you mean? You're gonna teleport over there and be like,
Mr. Shrek, I'm only asking if you would murder your wife or children to prove your devotion.
Well, there is certainly some biblical backing for this question, considering the story of Abraham and Isaac. I'm actually genuinely curious to see his answer here.
It's a simple question.
I don't know what would happen. And by the way, when God decides that someone should die, it's not murder for him.
Well, I feel like as a Christian, you're supposed to be willing to do anything that God asks or commands you to do. That being said, it's still murder. You're not going to get around that one.
Because God kills all of us at some point, and he's the only one that can resurrect us.
Well, death is a very natural process, no God needed. And as far as he's the only one that can resurrect people, okay, sure, in the story, yes, but we can't even prove the resurrection of Jesus. I mean, we don't even know who wrote the Gospels. There are no eyewitness testimonies that we can actually verify. So it's a pretty big claim to say that God can resurrect anybody at this point.
So I don't know what I would do, just like I'm never going to say if somebody put a gun to my head or a gun to my wife's head, what would you do?
Answering this question with "I don't know what I would do" is not a great look. Leaving aside your religious beliefs, there is only one answer to this question. No, I would not kill anybody. You don't need a God to know that.
Because Peter tried that. I'll never deny you, Lord. And what did he do?
He denied him 3 times. Yes, at the crucifixion.
I don't know what I would do, okay? But let me point out, if your friend is an atheist, there's nothing wrong with God doing anything, because by atheism, there's no standard of right and wrong anyway.
And here we go with the deflection that Frank is so famous for. All you have to do to ignore the argument is to say, well, atheists don't have any standard of what's right and wrong. And yet here we sit, I, as an atheist, have murdered all the people that I want to. And that number is 0. I mean, given the fact that we evolved as a social species, we absolutely do have a standard, and that standard can be summed up as human suffering. And what benefits us the most as a species as a whole is the reduction of human suffering. There's honestly a lot to go into on this topic, and it probably deserves its own video. But yes, atheists can have a standard, and atheists can know right from wrong, no God needed. And I'm sorry, but if you need a God to tell you not to murder somebody, or not to do this or that, you're not a good person anyway.
So in order for you to bring up the objection, you're actually stealing a standard from God in order to try and say God doesn't exist.
No, not even a little bit. And none of this is to mention the fact that a lot of the morality and the teachings in the Bible can be found in older sources that were written before the Bible. So no, absolutely a God is not needed for morality.
Hey Tommy, reading your message right here doesn't make any damn sense to me, because I doubt you understand what entropy is. And then if it is a fallen world, who caused it to fall? Who allowed it to fall? Who put it into his plan to make it that way, or make it possible to fall? Because if God created the world that was perfect and without natural evil, which we have zero evidence of that, then when Adam fell, so did creation. Does that mean that Adam is just as powerful or more powerful than God because he was able to alter God's creation in such a drastic and negative way? Do you see a major issue with that? Like I do. And then, with God knowing this, that is a fucked up issue, mainly because he knowingly knew that Adam and Eve would fall, and then purposely allowed natural disasters, natural evil to exist as a consequence, which doesn't make any fucking sense at all if he is all good. Do you see that? Do you understand where that's a big issue? An all good being would not cause unnecessary suffering at all.
This comment right here was left on a video I did about Job, specifically God orchestrating the death of Job's children. And this person's response to that was to say, newsflash, you don't own your children, God does. And this comment is the perfect example of how Christians excuse God's actions in the Bible. Why they don't seem to have a problem with the fact that God floods an entire world and kills everyone, including animals and babies. That God advocates for slavery. That God mandates sex slavery. Or that God has created eternal conscious torment as the punishment for people who don't worship him. They don't have a problem with these things because they're authoritarians. They don't believe in rights, they believe in ownership. They believe that God can do whatever the fuck he wants to do because he owns us. They claim they believe in objective morality, that actions are actually right or wrong, no matter what. But with comments like this, they show that they don't. Murder's not wrong, not if God does it, because he has the right to, because he owns you. With comments like this, they demonstrate that they are not concerned with the effects actions have on other people. Their morality is not based on the impact their actions have on people. Instead, their morality is vertical, and it's based on who has the authority to do it. And because they believe God has the authority, God can do no wrong in their eyes. They can excuse God for killing Job's children for the exact same reason that they have no problem with God torturing people in hell for all eternity. Because how they decide an action is moral or not is based on who has the authority to do it. Might makes right. That's the basis of their morality. This comment right here was left on a video I did about Job, specifically God orchestrating the death of Job's children. And this person's response to that was to say, newsflash, you don't own your children, God does. And this comment is the perfect example of how Christians excuse God's actions in the Bible. Why they don't seem to have a problem with the fact that God floods an entire world and kills everyone, including animals and babies. That God advocates for slavery. That God mandates sex slavery. Or that God has created eternal conscious torment as the punishment for people who don't worship him. They don't have a problem with these things because they're authoritarians. They don't believe in rights, they believe in ownership. They believe that God can do whatever the fuck he wants to do because he owns us. They claim they believe in objective morality, that actions are actually right or wrong, no matter what. But with comments like this, they show that they don't. Murder's not wrong, not if God does it, because he has the right to, because he owns you. With comments like this, they demonstrate that they are not concerned with the effects actions have on other people. Their morality is not based on the impact their actions have on people. Instead, their morality is vertical, and it's based on who has the authority to do it. And because they believe God has the authority, God can do no wrong in their eyes. They can excuse God for killing Job's children for the exact same reason that they have no problem with God torturing people in hell for all eternity. Because how they decide an action is moral or not is based on who has the authority to do it. Might makes right. That's the basis of their morality.
Time for another edition of Responding the Christians' Bullshit. Here we go.
How can an all-loving God send people to hell?
That is the question. Let's talk about justice.
Well, let's clarify that first term, all-loving.
Get ready for some verbal gymnastics. How do you clarify all-loving? It's pretty clear. All, as in all, and loving, as in loving. There's not really any room there. Very little wiggle room there.
God is not all love. God is love, but he is not all love.
So let me get this straight. God is love, but he's not all love? What the fuck does that mean?
God is also just.
Maybe, but that doesn't have anything to do with love, so I don't understand.
God is also holy.
Again, how does that deal with the love issue?
God is also righteous.
So if God is love, he can't also be just, holy, and righteous? Like these are mutually exclusive things? Like, did the other three, like, cancel out the other? That doesn't make any sense. I don't really understand where you're going with that. Not that I agree with you anyway. I don't think God is any of those things. I don't think God is real. I think God is imaginary. But that's aside from the point. Let's talk about the character of God. So, as portrayed in the Bible, the character of God. But let's continue. Go on.
So God is not all love.
So, that doesn't really make any sense. Number one, that God can't be all love and also have room for these other things. That doesn't make any sense. Also, it seems like you're limiting what God is. Like, you're putting limits on your God, which doesn't really make any sense. But okay, let's keep going.
Now, as far as God being perfectly just...
Well, let me stop you right there, buddy. If he can't be all love, then could he really be perfectly just if he has any love? I mean, again, you were talking about the mutually exclusiveness of these terms. So, I mean, I don't see where you're getting at. But okay, I want to get to the meat of this thing. So I'm going to allow this and let's keep going.
We have to look at the same system that we have legally.
Oh, goody, here it comes. So, you want to use our obviously flawed justice system to justify God's perfect justice system. And what I want to show is that our obviously flawed justice system is way, way better than God's perfect justice. And that is going to be fun. So let's go.
If we have a judge who lets a criminal go because they were sorry or they felt bad for them, we would call that unjust.
No, we wouldn't. Not necessarily. See, I don't think you understand what the word justice means, right? So when we talk about justice, what is the purpose of justice?
Same way with God, if he lets sin go unpunished, then he's no longer perfectly just. You see, justice requires evil to always get the just punishment.
Why? Why does justice require evil to get the just punishment? What is the purpose of punishment? The purpose of punishment is so the person can think back and reflect and change. It's redemption. That's the purpose of justice, is redemption.
Now, you may not like that justice.
Our entire legal system is based on the concept of redemptive justice, right? It may not work very well. I mean, there's a lot of recidivism. There's a lot of issues with wrong people getting incarcerated. There's a lot of problems with it, sure. But the concept of our legal system, the concept of our justice, is based on redemption.
You may disagree with it, but last time I checked, it's the judge who has the authority to dictate what is just and unjust.
No, that's not how our justice works at all. Juries decide guilt and innocence, not the judge. The judge makes sure that both sides get a fair representation so that we can find justice, so that we can figure out what happened and who's at fault, right? The judge also is in charge of sentencing, right? And that's key too, sentencing, right? Because when we look at sentencing, we see that we have a system where people are sentenced for their crimes and then are released back into the public if they have reformed, if we believe that they have been reformed. Now, there are some other caveats to that, but that's the general idea. That's the purpose of our justice system, is to reform criminals, right? Now, when you look at God's perfect justice, there is no reform, right? He punishes not out of justice or out of an attempt to reform someone, but just out of pleasure. And that's not justice. That's wrong, right? That's vengeance, right? Which is the opposite of justice, right? So when you look at God's perfect justice system, you're talking about hell, right? And hell is eternal. There is no parole. There is no reprieve. That's the punishment. So if you look at a timeline of events, right? You commit a crime, right? You are sentenced to a point in time, and then you're released. Now, sometimes the sentence is life, right? But usually there's a possibility of parole or reprieve with that life. Not always, but there ought to be. In the perfect justice system, there would be, because that's the purpose of justice, is redemptive, right? But with God, that's not the purpose, because you live like maybe 100 years, maybe if you're lucky. And if you commit that finite amount of time that you're alive, that's your crime. And the punishment for that finite amount of time of living is eternal torture for all eternity, which is a pretty fucking long time. It's eternal, with no possibility of parole, no possibility of reprieve. So there is no learning your lesson. There is no redemption. That's it. You're done, right? So that's the opposite of justice.
Now, God has decided to take the punishment on himself, therefore fulfilling the just requirement of the law.
And now you're proving my point even more with this vicarious redemption thing. All right, so let's open this scenario up a little bit. All right, so let's say you kill someone, and the judge goes, okay, how do you plead? And you say, I'm guilty. I have no fucking remorse. I'm glad I fucking killed them, right? And you have no remorse whatsoever. And the judge goes, you know what? The jury says, okay, he's guilty. Obviously, he admitted it. And the judge goes, all right, we're going to sentence you to life in prison. And then the judge goes, but you know what? I'm going to take your place. I'm going to let you, who is a convicted murderer, go back out on the street, and I'm going to go into prison in your stead. Is that really justice? Really? You're letting a convicted murderer go out there who has no remorse, who wants to go and kill more people? And you think that's justice? That's not justice, buddy. And the judge isn't a good person for releasing that person back out into the public where he's going to kill more people.
Except substituting himself in our place. It would be like the judge coming down from his chair and saying to the criminal, you know what, you did this, but I'm going to pay the price. I'm going to pay the fine. I'm going to pay the punishment for you instead.
Yeah, man, if the judge lets a convicted murderer go out who has no remorse and has said he wants to murder more people, he goes, I'm going to let you go out there and kill more people, and I'm going to take your place in prison. That's not justice. So, I don't know what your idea of justice is, but that is not it.
The argument that there can be no knowledge of morality, no sense of right and wrong, unless God is the source of that knowledge, is completely illogical and irrational. It is a baseless assertion with no justification. This video will be my refutation of the argument that God is the objective moral standard. Whoever continues to make this argument after watching this video is intellectually dishonest. If you won't even watch this video and give it serious consideration, then you are likely brainwashed, and I have no interest in arguing with someone who is brainwashed. First, let me point out that what these people are really suggesting is that the Bible is the written word of God, where God actually told other humans his infallible objective standard of morality and expects us to believe what God told them. The only other way God could inform humanity of his moral code would be through universal direct inspiration, such that every human is divinely inspired with knowledge of God's moral code. This would manifest in something like an unexplainable, universal, and consistent conscience, where all people would agree as to what is good and bad. But this is obviously not the case. So that point is easily refuted. But just in case you didn't understand it, let me give you one example. If God inspired humanity with his moral code, then you wouldn't have some people who thought that being gay was morally good and other people who thought being gay was morally bad. If God inspired people with his moral code without writing it in a book, then all humanity would agree as to what is good and bad. There are innumerable differences as to what people consider to be good and bad. Therefore, God cannot divinely inspire humanity with his objective moral standard. So point number one is that these people are arguing that the Bible is actually God's written objective moral standard, but the Bible is easily refuted as an objective moral standard. In point number two, I will demonstrate that the Bible is not an objective moral standard. For the sake of argument, I am defining the Bible as a collective of 66 books that begin with Genesis and end with Revelation. One of God's 10 commandments in the Bible is thou shalt not kill. But God contradicts himself many times in the Bible by commanding the Israelites to take the lives of their enemies and those who break his laws. An objective moral standard cannot contradict itself based on circumstances. That would make God a subjective moral standard. An objective standard does not change or contradict itself. God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, then changed his mind and replaced the human sacrifice with an animal sacrifice. Objective moral standards, by definition, are not subject to change. The Bible says in Proverbs 17:15 that condemning the innocent and justifying the guilty are both abominations. But New Testament Christianity is fundamentally based on these two abominations. Objective moral standards are not subject to change and cannot contradict. It is not remotely possible that the Bible is an objective moral standard. In point 3, I will explain how morality is determined in reality. All moral conclusions are subjective. For example, we can agree that taking the life of others for some reasons are immoral, but for other reasons it can be moral. If someone is attacking you or your loved ones, then taking their life can be considered moral. Subjective morality does not mean the same act is good one day and bad the next. It also does not mean the same act is good for one person and bad for another person. Society determines morality. This is why humans have different morals in different cultures. The Native American morals were different from the European morals. The Arab morals are different from the Christian morals. One human society can determine that another human society is acting immorally and decide to intervene. Sometimes intervention comes in the form of written human laws, and sometimes intervention comes in the form of war. Then humans discuss whether the form of intervention was moral or not. God does not determine right and wrong, humans do. And the foundation for determining morality is usually a logical evaluation on what causes the least amount of harm. In summary, God does not impart knowledge of his objective moral standards through divine intervention or through the Bible. Humans debate morality based on what causes the least harm.